Hey, what's going on, folks? I was hoping for a layup today, but that's not what God had in store for me this afternoon. Right in front of you, right there. Very fascinating species of orchid. This is Liparis, liliifolia, the lily-leaved twayblade. We'll get into that in 1 second, but just goddamn, Connecticut's been eating me alive, you know? I got this pin from somebody, and in my infinite wisdom, rather than poke around where I'm at right now for 10 minutes, I immediately got out my kayak, threw that thing in the water, and started patrolling the shoreline for this species because the other Liparis species that occurs in New England is Liparis loeselii, which is an emergent, like, wetland plant. So again, in my infinite wisdom, I took to the seas behind us, actually just a large pond. Beautiful large pond, by the way. I'm happy. Don't get me wrong. It's nice to be on the water. And paddled around looking for this thing on the shoreline. Basically, went around the circumference of the entire pond. Had to bail the fucking thing out at one point. And then came all the way around, back around to the shoreline. Tried to get a hold of my friend. Couldn't, because he gave me the location for this. Couldn't. And then, dejected, I just walked through these woods to be like, okay, well, we got to make some content. And here the fucking thing was, less than a minute's walk from where I parked my car. So I've been here for like 2.5, 3 hours. Just found this thing. Soaked because my kayak does leak a little bit. It's fine. They all do. And here it is, Liparis liliifolia. So obviously this is not an emergent wetland plant. This is a plant that grows in rich woods. This is a species of Liparis. They're commonly called, wide-lipped orchids. Maybe you can kind of see why from how the flowers look on the thing. And then some people also still refer to them as twayblades. So now I know twayblades as species in the genus Nymphaeaceae, like Nymphaeaceae bifolia. I think at one point they were all thrown together. I think at one point they were all actually, most of them were in the genus Malaxis. So very, very succinct deep dive on orchids. I know succinct deep dive's an oxymoron. Bear with me here, because I haven't really I'm trying to do more of these. So consider this your intro to orchids. We'll kind of phrase it like that. So if you're just tuning in for the first time, you've never heard me talk about orchids before, pay attention to this. This is kind of dry, but this is good information, okay? So orchids, the family Orchidaceae, is a family in the order Variegales. So orchids are, broadly speaking, relatives of things like irises, asparagus, agave. What else is in there that's pretty cool? Asparagus, why am I blanking? The Nolinas, Nolinoidea. You probably can't see it in this video, but there's a ton of like little single leaves around. Some of them are even still in bloom. Maanthum canadense. That's in that order. Technically, that's used to be in its own family, Ericaceae. Now it's lumped in with the Variegatae. It's a pretty big order of monocots, all right? You got Asparagatales, you got liliales, you got poales. Those are kind of your heavy hitters. You got a whole bunch of weird monocot lineages too, but we're getting way off topic here because we're talking about orchids. So Orchidaceae, for the unindoctrinated, this is the family that holds this is the single family that is the most diverse by number of species in the world. I've way overestimated it at one point. I want to say it's something like I know it's 800 genera. I want to say 27. It's obviously going to vary depending on what taxonomic scheme you use. Hang on, I could pull it up right here. Orchidaceae. Let's see. Okay, 28,000 species in 700 to 800 genera, depending on how you circumscribe that. So, big juicy millipede. I saw a cool cockroach here a minute ago. Hang on. Well, that orchid's not going anywhere. This millipede's on the move. Yeah, Narcissus. These are part of a whole complex of species. I didn't get the roach, but I got you, my friend. Hang on, I'm going to put this back on the orchid for a second. I can always skip this if I have to. Look at you, my friend. You're beautiful. Sorry, hang on. I got to take a picture with my phone. My little GPS tag's on the fritz. So everything I'm taking pictures of these days has to be done with my cell camera because that's GPS. These things will shoot will shoot smelly compounds at you. They're pretty caustic, if I remember correctly. That's a nice big one too. Yeah, hang on, you can see him again. Oh, I'm gonna call you Phil. Okay, that's enough of Phil. All right, get it, Phil? Chlorophyll, like P-H-Y-L-L. Phil, nice. Okay. Anyway, the Orchidaceae. This is a massive family, and now when you start getting into these massive families, and this is important because this is how you start to like narrow down what you're seeing, and you know, even if you can get something to subfamily sometimes in these massive families, that's more helpful than just knowing like, oh, it's an orchid, or oh, it's a you know, oh, it's a sunflower, it's something, it's an aster, you know. So Orchidaceae is divided into 5 principal subfamilies, technically 6, but I don't really buy into one of those divisions. So you have the biggest, largest group, which is where the vast majority of species find themselves, is actually the subfamily that this is in. This that would be Epidendroideae. So epidendron upon dendron upon trees. That's the epiphytic orchid subfamily. Now, of course, there are non-epiphytic orchids in that family. We're looking at one right now. That is the, quote, most evolved family of orchids. Those are, you know, your dendrobiums, your phalaenopsis, your super showy, like stereotypical orchid, which I like to call phalaenopsis gas station orchids, because that's usually where people buy them. I'll put a picture of one up, you know. That is usually what people are thinking of when they're thinking of, you know, orchids. Now, they split those into higher and lower epidendroids, but as far as I know, neither of those are, you know, entirely monophyletic. They keep going back and forth in the taxonomy there, so I just broadly say Epidendroideae. Within any subfamily, you'll also have like tribes, super tribes, whatever. This is in the tribe Malaxinae, which is the Malaxis tribe, which holds like all of the twayblades, a lot of so-called LGOs, little green orchids, Malaxis bayardii, and unifolia, and it's a few of them. There's a few species of Malaxis in New England. I did an episode on Malaxis bayardii. I'll put up there. So this guy is related to those. You also have, you know, underneath that, Orchidoideae. So those are your like just in New England, those are your Platanthera, your Spiranthes, your Goodyera, which we can see one not in bloom, but it's got its leaves out. That's also like the genus Orchis, so the actual like original, you know, Orchis orphreys. The orchids that Darwin was working with are in that terrestrial orchid subfamily, which is what they call that. Although there are, you know, just like there are terrestrial orchids in Epidendroideae, there are epiphytic orchids in Orchidoideae. You get what I'm saying here. One notch below that, the number of species in the subfamily start dropping off dramatically. So, you know, there's well over 10,000 species in Epidendroideae, thousands of orchidoids. Excuse me. You go below that, you start looking at vanilloids, and then the anatomy starts getting weird at that point. So, or I'm sorry, is it vanilloids or is it? Oh, I'm going to get them crisscrossed. Vanilloids or cypripedioids? No, I think one notch below that is Cypripedioideae. So the lady slippers, which if you're in New England, everybody knows the pink lady slippers. Those are those, you know, actually very large and showy, beautiful plants. Probably the orchid, Cypripedium McCall, pink lady slipper, probably the one orchid most New Englanders have seen in their lifetime. You know, there's a few other species native to New England there. Then you get the vanilloids, which for us in New England, there's only 3 species. That's Pogonia ophioglossoides, and then the two Isotria species, Medialoides, which is an extremely rare orchid, and Verticillata. I've done episodes about all 3 of these species, which I can put up now if you want to go look at those. All fascinating, beautiful orchids. Those are all vanilloids. Yes, that is where vanilla flavoring comes from. Vanilla, the actual, you know, that specific one is in that subfamily. And then lastly, you get a subfamily we don't get any representatives of in North America because they're extremely restricted to like Southeast Asia, Northeast Australia, the Apostacioideae, which to most people, they do not even really resemble orchids. So that's like the most basal lineage. So digest that, take that in. Gotta get something like in my throat now. Give you a whole rundown of orchid taxonomy there. I do also want to, give a shout out. I'll put this map up here right now. Okay, this is orchid diversity in the United States, by region. And what you're going to notice is, nobody holds a candle to, South Florida. But look at New England and look at Appalachia. Most of the orchid diversity outside of Florida in, the continental United States is in Appalachia and in New England. A lot of really fascinating, southern species are reaching their northern terminus here, and a lot of really cool circumpolar, circumarctic, circumboreal, cold weather, fen and bog orchids are reaching their southern terminus here. So you're in a region where you're getting species that occur, as far south as Florida, like Pogonia ophioglossoides, kind of hitting their northern terminus in New England and in the Canadian Maritimes. And then you're getting these orchids that also occur on Greenland, I'm gonna butcher one. Why can't I think of one? Not one comes to mind right now, but I'll put up a good example of one. Like your Platanthera aquilanus, gets up there pretty far. There's definitely species that are occurring in Greenland and in New England, but I digress. I really like them. These are what got me into botany. This is my bread and butter, and that diversity is fascinating to have. The wide array of species, you get 65 in New England. Some of them probably no longer extant, but what are you going to do? This particular species has taken a massive blow to its population. It's a 90% reduction in extant habitat. So, yeah, okay. I think that's enough context for orchids. There's your crash course. Hopefully I put a little, whatever in front of there so that you can skip ahead to the meat and potatoes, which we'll get into now. I will also say, Liparis aloicelii, I've done a video on. It briefly appears in a video on calcareous fens. I highly recommend you check that out. I'm really proud of that episode. Beautiful habitat you can see in that one. All right, so let's get in here and really, get to the core of this thing. Oh, this one's closer. So what you're looking at there, that kind of purple thing, that's the bottom petal. That is what we refer to in orchid anatomy as a labellum. So, all right, this is one of those occasions where the phone might honestly do a better job than the camera. So here's one of these lovely individual flowers, and what you're looking at here on the bottom, this kind of a erotic looking pink thing, that's the labellum. That's that lower lip petal. That is what orchids are famous for. They are typically employing some very fascinating methods of modification. This one just made theirs bigger and showy to attract whatever the pollinator is. But like I said, Cypripedioideae, which we talked about, those are, pretty elaborate, crazy looking freaking pouches on the thing. What you'll notice is these two wiry dangly things on the side. Well, there's one, there's two of them, there's on each side. Okay, that is, the lateral petals, extremely reduced. Up top there is a dorsal sepal. Down below there are the two lateral sepals. Okay, this thing right in front of my finger, right, that's the column. Attached to the top of the column is what is known as a pollinia. That is an aggregated sticky mass of pollen. It's another trademark amongst orchids. Cypripedioids and apistacioids don't do that. They have regular anthers. Cypripedioids have 2, apistacioids have 3, but every other orchid has just one functional stamen. It's just producing a sticky blob of pollen, because when orchids get pollinated, after that pollinia gets dragged away and the thing then becomes receptive to being pollinated, the sticky mass of pollen allows it to basically just make a massive amount of seed. Tiny, hundreds of thousands of tiny dust-like seeds are typically present in an orchid fruit. Okay, orchids can do, the no leaves thing. They can become completely, parasitic. This one is not, one of those. All orchids are extremely dependent on their symbiosis with mycorrhizae. So like, symbiotic fungus in the soil, they need to germinate. Their seeds don't have endosperm. So what they do is they basically piggyback off of fungi in the soil for the first few years at least, if not their entire life. And that allows them to, get really creative with growing in deep shade like the species, growing with highly reduced leaves, growing really weird, difficult to grow in locations like, bogs and fens, and just generally, go about their life as they choose. This species, Liparis liliifolia, gets its name because, it's got these leaves that do resemble like the leaves of Clintonia. They do look like lily leaves. So, I mean, this is just a beautiful freaking species. Bigger than I expected. And does it have a nectar spur? That's something I wanted to see. It looked like there was. Well, maybe not. A lot of orchids are employing methods to dupe their pollinators into pollinating them. I've got no clue if this is one such species. This one's much more interesting to me for its, I hate to say for its rarity, but I mean, Liparis are they're just fascinating architecturally. Look at this thing. So, I think, I probably already recorded close to 15 minutes of material just on this species alone. We can really briefly cover some of the other things co-occurring here. And then honestly, I wouldn't mind for once having it be a short day, So, Liparis liliifolia, great species. Cool to finally see it. Doubt that I will ever come back or seek this one out again, because I really don't think, you see one of those ones where you can see it once and then, move on, unless you're actively, working to monitor the population. I just happened to jump in here and, get it on video, document the fact that it was occurring, because at the rate that, habitat destruction with today's current, political climate, God only knows how long half this shit's gonna be here before it gets, sold to foreign investors or whatever the fuck they're trying to do. So, Liparis liliifolia, we'll go look at a couple other things and we'll get out of here. Yeah, I got cut off there, but that's okay. I was just basically saying, don't be spilling your guts about super rare plant species to any, Tom, Dick, and Harry that happens to walk your way. Certainly document their occurrence, report it to respectable authorities, but you don't want to just be, posting willy-nilly on social media. Hey, I found this here. It's one thing to take a picture. Some people go really far and they do everything on a black background. I don't really, I'm not sure. I tend not to include habitat shots with super rare stuff. I generally get it close up. That could still be ill-advised, but, oh, hang on. Here's a better, just a better example of that Viburnum acerifolium. What those flowers look like. Beautiful plant. Not really the rarest thing in the world, though. Okay, got one more thing to show you, and then we'll get out of here. And then right there, you've got a different species of orchid, one not in bloom. This is Goodyera pubescens, the downy rattlesnake plantain. Substantially, more common around these parts than either of the Liparis species. But I didn't mention, I did mention the Liparis liliifolia episode. I did. Significantly more common, probably the second or third most common species of orchid you can encounter, at least native species. You can always, you get Epipactis halberine growing everywhere, it seems. But one that is able to be seen most times of the year, because it has an extremely persistent flowering stalk over the winter. And then even when not in bloom, it has these beautiful, beautiful, highly charismatic, reticulate, was that? No, like veined leaves. You get what I'm saying there. So this one is in the, subfamily Orchidoideae, so the terrestrial orchid subfamily. This one's more closely related to Spiranthes, Orchis, Platanthera, those guys. Not much else to add about it. Just figured I'd show it to you because, cool juxtaposition to the Liparis liliifolia a little bit further up the slope there. So, God, was there anything else I wanted to add about this? But this particular species, you get 4 of these in New England. Pubescens is damn abundant, and then you get Tessellata is also not that rare. Then oblongifolia occurs out here, but it's disjunct, much more common out west. And lastly, you would have repens, which is the small one. That's the real rare one, generally speaking. Oblongifolia is only rare in New England. It's much more common if you go out into the right type of habitat. So, yeah, the only other thing I wanted to mention is orchids technically don't form rhizomes. Monocots in general don't do that, but this one's pretty famous because this one will sprawl out and it will use its rhizome-like roots to make some pretty damn big colonies. You know what I mean? So that's this guy, and let's see what, if anything else, we would like to talk about. Hey, so we mentioned, being mycorrhizal, having an association with fungi as being something a lot of orchids do. So too do pyrolas. I'm not super sure what species of pyrola this is. Probably Pyrola elliptica. But there's a few different species of pyrola. These are, again, you know what a subfamily is now. These are in a subfamily of the blueberry family, Ericaceae, known as Monotropoideae. If you ever heard of a ghost pipe, that is functionally the group of individuals we're working with here. So Pyrola is at the very most something called a hemiparasite, because it does photosynthesize a bit on its own, but it's probably most likely still stealing, a bit from the soil. Nevertheless, it does have a strong association with mycorrhizae in the soil. Generally speaking, most plants do. Just in the case of some plants, they start to turn that symbiosis one-sided. So instead of the plant giving the fungus a little bit of sugar, and the fungus giving the plant a little bit of soil nutrients, the plant can basically just start taking the nutrients, giving nothing in return. And eventually, in extreme cases, like with Monotropa uniflora, it just starts living off of the fungus in general. Doesn't ever seem to hurt anything in the grand scheme of things. No harm, no foul. But nevertheless, a cool example of a parasitism in the plant community. Check this out. There's more. Yeah, orchids will do that too. Like some of the Corallariza species, they don't even have leaves. They're just brown. They stick out of the ground. They do nothing but steal. There's another, another little patch of a Goodyera pubescens. Nice little habitat. It took me a second to lock in, but I'm glad that I didn't just throw in the towel because it got my ass a little bit wet. Nice shitter out in the parking lot here too, to do your business, and I appreciate that wholeheartedly. But I think that I think we can get close to wrapping this up. This is a long video just because I wanted to just do a deep dive on orchids. It's good stuff. Anyway, here's a cool plant that I've never got a chance to talk about up close. This is a Nuphar variegata. All right, this is the yellow pond lily, same family, Nymphaeaceae, as Nymphaea odorata, the much more widely known, so to speak, species of quote unquote water lily. Of course, no relation to lilies at all. These are basal angiosperms. Nymphaeaceae is the order, I believe, sister to Amberales, like the most basal flowering plants you can get. These things have been around relatively unchanged for quite a long time. Now, Nuphar, obviously, instead of having a ton of white petals, has three yellow petals, some green sepals there, and if you actually look into the thing, just that prehistoric looking stigma, just absolutely rimmed with stamens there. Quite an odd looking plant, and not one that, unless you're a kayaker, not one many people are gonna, get up close to. I usually see it growing a little bit deeper than, Nymphaea odorata. Leaves are oval instead of, round, like your characteristic water lily, so to speak. But anyway, you get a whole bunch of them. Not a rare plant, just one that's awfully hard to get to. These guys are just getting started for the year. No clue what pollinates them. Maybe some sort of beetle, perhaps. But we should probably turn around and head back over to where we started. Okay, last thing. We had some substantially better examples out over the water, but I'm not doing all that again. This is for a plant that I've talked about numerous times. I just wanted to show you the beautiful pink morph of Kalmia latifolia they've got around here. Real pretty. This one's still in bud. Out over the water where it's open, they were mostly in bloom, but these guys in the shade are trailing, you know, a couple, maybe like a week behind. In any case, beautiful even in bud, this plant is. And there's one of the flowers, so you get an idea. Same family as that frickin' Pyrola, if you can believe it or not. Ericaceae, a evergreen one. So beautiful plant, staple of like the southern Appalachian forests. Obviously makes it up into lowland New England too. Got that beautiful bark on.